What's up, guys, and welcome to another week, another episode of the Texas Fishing Force. I'm Mike, and before we get started, I want to thank all of you that stopped by last week for the live stream, for the 10,000 subscriber giveaway live stream. I had a ton of fun. I hope you guys had a ton of fun. It was just a blast, and if you couldn't make it, well, don't worry, we will do some more live streams in the future. I had so much fun. It's just something that I want to add to my channel here and there. Just randomly, we'll do some live streams in the future, so don't worry. But let's talk about fishing. If there's one word that I could use to describe fishing this month, even last month, well, that word is inconsistent. See, some days you go out there and you just slam fish, just nonstop, fish after fish. It just seems like every other cast you're catching fish, and you can go back to the same exact spot the next day and you struggle to find them at all. And if you do find them, well, you struggle to get them to bite. It's just the way it is. It's been really, really inconsistent, and it happens every single year. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, why that happens and what you can do to improve your odds. So let's get started. All right, well, we are in mid-January, which also means that we are in mid-winter. See, in Texas, our winters, they start a little bit later than pretty much everywhere else in the country. And our winters are just inconsistent. One day you're going to have weather and temperatures that are like 35 degrees, and literally the next day they'll be at 75. So our air temperature is all over the place, but on top of that, our water temperature is constantly changing. It's just inconsistent. Our pressure is all over the place. And then you add all of that on top of the fact that our water levels are so incredibly low right now. A lot of that water is being pushed out, and sometimes you're talking 2 or 3 feet lower than normal, lower than average. And well, it can make it tricky. It can make it really, really frustrating. All right, so let's first talk about water levels, because I think that's probably the most recognizable difference between this time of year and really the rest of the year. You go down to the water and you just notice, well, there's not a whole lot of it. A lot of that water is being pushed out. It's 2-3 feet low. It's really hard to even launch boats and kayaks in some of those places that you've launched in the past because the water is so low. Now, that can really create a really tough and a really frustrating situation, but it can also create an opportunity. See, I like to fish a lot of the marshes, and if you can get back into the marshes, well, a lot of those fish, they're really caught in those areas, in those shallow water, and so you can run up on huge schools, which one is really, really cool to see. When you turn a corner and you see these huge schools of redfish rolling through that shallow water, which would normally be like 4 or 5 foot deep, but now it's like 2. Well, you have a lot of opportunity to catch fish. In fact, I did that a few weeks ago. I went out there. I thought that I was going to have to drag my kayak to get into the marsh, but I found a way back there, and it just seemed like every other turn I was rolling up on these schools of redfish, and they were everywhere, and they were all fighting over the lures that I was throwing. It seemed like the moment that lure hit the water, those fish were on it, and they were fighting. And a lot of times, throughout the year, after you catch a few redfish, you really spook that school, and then they take off and you got to go find them again. And I'm just not seeing that this time of year, and they stick around a lot longer, and you can sometimes pull out 4 or 5 redfish in a row before they really take off, because they're all fighting over that bait. But what if you can't get back into those areas? Well, this is the time of year when I really, really try to find those deep guts, those channels, those deeper areas, and that's when I start targeting trout. I really, really like throughout the year to mark all of those deep spots as I'm going by. If I'm fishing in like 3-4 foot of water and I find drop-offs that are 6-8 foot, I'm always marking those on my fish finder, because those are good places when the water level gets low to go check out. I did a video last year when the water got low like this. I went into a place that I knew had a really, really deep channel, and I just fished up and down the channel. Ended up catching some amazing trout. I think I caught a 27-inch trout in there. And I ended up with like 5 or 6 really good trout on the day. And this is that time where you can kind of capitalize on all of those opportunities to fish those deeper areas and really find fish that are kind of piled up in those holes. Okay, so another issue that everyone seems to have this time of year. I know I've had this problem. I've talked to a lot of other great fishermen that they all seem to be complaining about this. Is even when you go out and you find these fish, you know they're there, you can see them, you cast to them, and they're just not interested. They just, I've heard a few times people have said, I casted at 100 different redfish, and I only caught 3 because they're just not biting. They're not interested at all, and that can be really, really frustrating. And there's a few things that you can do. One thing, when I get on those fish and they're just laying there, they're not interested, they're not biting, that is when I start switching lures like crazy. I switch over to top waters, I'll switch over to a popping cork with lures, I'll switch colors, I'll switch a lot of those things, and I'm doing everything I can just to, one, see what they like, because sometimes, especially during this time of year, they get really, really picky. They're only interested in 1 or 2 types of things, and sometimes just switching it up a little bit is enough to get them to bite. Secondly, I will sit there and I will work those at different speeds and really try to figure out what it takes to get them to bite. I'm really just trying to annoy them enough to get a bite out of them, or possibly just find the right bait, what they want. And I know it can be really, really difficult to just find that right combination that they really, really want. But at the end of the day, fish, they've got to eat eventually. And so sometimes I will stay on those fish for a while and just sit there and rotate baits and really try to get something that they're willing to bite onto. Now, there's an old saying that you never want to leave fish to find fish. And I agree with that most of the time. But this time of year, sometimes that's your best option. I hate to do it. I hate to leave fish that I know that I can see right there in front of me. I hate to leave them to go look for other fish, but if you're wasting a ton of time and they're just not interested, they're just not biting, for me, I'd rather move on and try to find another group if I can. I will do everything I can to get that group of fish to bite, but if they're not, sometimes it's a better option to move on to the next school of fish, see what you can find. All right, the last thing that you can do to really improve your chances of catching some of these fish that you found is just change the speed in which you retrieve those lures. During these winter months, these fish are, they're lethargic, they're lazy, and a lot of times they're not willing to go chase after fast-moving baits through the water. So when you slow them down and really, really, get that slow retrieve, a lot of times that's enough, to get that fish to actually bite, because they're not going to chase after a lot of it when they're just not interested. But moving that lure really, really slowly through the water, sometimes that's enough. And I find that I hook up a lot more during this time of the year when I'm moving really, really, really slowly. Now, if I switch to a top water, and I like to, walk the dog on a top water, but I'm moving that thing so incredibly slow. And if that's not working, maybe I'll speed it up a little bit, just to kind of get that. Same thing with popping corks. I find myself, throughout most of the year, popping it every 5 to 7 seconds. But during these months, I'm really just popping it and I let it sit there, sometimes 10, 12 seconds before I pop it again, just kind of letting it hang in front of them and hoping that is enough to get a reaction bite, just kind of laying there in the water. So I do find myself moving really, really slow and slowing everything down about my fishing, and that seems to help a lot. All right, guys, well, that is it. I hope these tips help you catch fish in a time when it's just tough. It's tricky. It's frustrating. But I hope these tips will help you catch some more fish, maybe find some more fish, do what it takes. There is a silver lining, though. As we move forward in the next few months, fishing, weather, all of the conditions, it's just going to get a lot more consistent, and it makes it a lot easier for us. So we've got to get through the next few weeks, and I think fishing is going to get a lot more consistent and a lot better for everyone. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, like, comment below, and we'll see you next time.